Okay, so it's time to talk about Rurouni Kenshin, the final. It's a film that at one point in time we thought we might never be getting because, of course, we had the original Kenshin film in 2012, and then, of course, 2014, they followed it up with films 2 and 3, which were shot simultaneously. And then that was it. 2014 to 2020, 2021, it's a long time. So, of course, Rurouni Kenshin the final, and of course the prequel, Rurouni Kenshin the beginning, they were shot back to back in the second half of 2019, and they were originally supposed to release last year, but of course, due to shenanigans, we we've had to wait a little longer, but it's worked out quite nicely because we've got, of course, this film, Kenshin the Final, released as a Netflix original over here in the UK. And what a treat it is. I watched it the day it came out, but I've sat on doing a review for it. I wanted to process because, of course, there's always that initial hype after you've watched a film you've been anticipating for a long time, and I didn't want to fall into hyperbole, get caught up in the excitement. So I've been processing, and I've got to say, this is a fantastic film. It's great. Of course, this is the final arc, really, of the Kenshin story. It's the plot of this, basically. Obviously, it's set in 1879, so it's more or less a year after the original 3 films have taken place. And Kenshin, of course, living with Kaoru, Sanosuke, Yahiko at the dojo in Tokyo, and they're all very happy together. Obviously, they've gone through a lot of twists and turns. They've faced a lot of turmoil along the way. It hasn't been easy for them, but it's made them a really, really strong unit. But then another ghost from Kenshin's past rocks up or comes back to haunt him. So it's in the form of Inishi Yukishiro, who it turns out was the brother of Kenshin's wife Tomo. They were married during the war, more or less 15 years earlier, prior to the events of this film. During the war, Kenshin met this girl, fell in love, and it was ultimately revealed that Tomo, Kenshin's wife, was a plant. She was a spy. She was basically planted in amongst the imperialists to get close to Kenshin and find his weak spots, and ultimately lure him into an ambush where he would be killed. But hell if it is, she fell for him and ultimately couldn't go through with it, and ultimately, in trying to save him, she lost her own life. Obviously, her younger brother, Anishi, he was radicalised by the same people who recruited his sister, and he's basically never forgiven Kenshin for what happened to Tomo. He saw basically the death of Tomo at Kenshin's hands. He saw Kenshin kill her in the woods, in the snow, and it's haunted him ever since. And obviously that, vengeance will be mine one day. So in the 15 years that transpired since the death of his sister, he went over to Shanghai and got involved in the underworld there with the triads, and he worked his way up and become something of a crime lord, dealing in all kinds of weapons and smuggling. And it's revealed, it's a cool little connection to the second and third film, that the battleship that Shishio has in the second and third films, apparently that was sold to Shishio by Inishi. So it was a nice little bit of connective tissue. So obviously Anishi's come back to Japan to play out his revenge, and he's brought some friends with him. Basically, it's how Shishio had his 10 swords. Inishi has his own equivalent, just as deadly. And, you know, they've got this plot that they're going to carry out. They're going to basically attack various government buildings, you know, basically sending a message to Kenshin that, you know, we know where you are, we know we can hit you where it hurts, and obviously things are gradually getting closer and closer to home. Obviously, the bomber restaurant that Kenshin and Kaoru and Co frequent often, and then ultimately they attack the dojo. So obviously things are escalating and escalating, and obviously, you know, Kenshin and his band of heroes, you know, Sanosuke never is the kind of guy to shy away from the fight. Kaoru, of course, very, very strong character. You know, she's going to support Kenshin, whatever, you know, come hell or high water, she's going to be right there with Kenshin. And then we bring in some familiar faces from the previous movies. We've got, of course, Shinomori Aoshi and Misao. They're both back. They come to lend a hand. Interestingly enough, Misao is the bearer of gifts when she arrives in the film. She comes to Tokyo with Aoshi. They're looking for Kenshin because they've got they've found, or should I say, one of the Buddhist priests that Misao knows actually was in possession of Tomoe's diary. And basically he's given it to Misao to return to Kenshin. You know, I thought, you know, since you were her husband, you should have this. So that was a nice little touch. But then obviously they realise, basically, Aoshi and Misao get there when the action's well underway. So they're like, oh, where's Kenshin? It's like, oh, you have no idea what's gone on here. So they're like, right, we're going to stick around to help. And of course, there's one other character who we can always rely on, the coolest character in this series, Hajime Saito, the man himself, the Dirty Harry of the Rurouni Kenshin universe, played by the so cool Eguchi Yosuke, who, you talk about a guy who's winning in life. It gets to play a fantastic character in Hajime Saito, who's also such an interesting character from Japanese history, and he's married to one of the most beautiful women in Japan, the extremely talented Chisato Moritaka. This is a guy who, you know, you've just got to admire. And he's great in this. He's actually, of the main characters, they don't even make you wait to see Hajime Saito. He's the first of the main characters that you see. The film actually starts with Anishi arriving in Japan. He arrives by train, and Saito's there with the rest of the police force there to basically meet him and take him into custody, because he should have gotten word that he's came here illegally. he's smuggled himself into Japan, and obviously he's bad news, so they're there to intercept him. And this is another thing, the action in this film is they've surpassed themselves, because the action in the first three films was phenomenal. Of course, they raised the bar in this like you wouldn't believe. Basically, in terms of running time as well, because this film's got a really good pace to it. You know, it's one of the things about some of the Kenshin films, they're more methodically paced, whereas this film, it fits in the same general running time. The Kenshin films have always been in that 2 hour 10 minute to 2 hour 20 minute bracket. This is much the same. Basically, the way this film's paced, you've got the first hour or so where it's setting up, you know, establishing what the story is and basically drawing the battle lines. Then the last hour of this just goes like you wouldn't believe. The action kicks off and it just keeps on going. and it's fantastic. You know, uh, Takeru Sato, who plays Kenshin, absolutely phenomenal. You know, he's a great actor, of course, but he's a phenomenal swordsman as well. He was, of course, the action in all the first three films, fantastic. But 7 years, give or take, that's a long time. I mean, Takeru Sato's still young, of course, but still, he's 7 years older. You wouldn't think so. He's just as fast as he was back then. He hasn't lost a step. None of them have. And this is one of the cool things. The fact that we've had a 7 year gap between films, you wouldn't think when you watch this. The way they just slip back into it, it's amazing. It's like they've never been away. Like in years to come, if you're showing someone these films, you could show them all of the films one after the other. They wouldn't. You wouldn't even know about the 7 year gap, because it's great. You know, everyone looks at. No one's aged. No one's aged, and the sets and the locations all look the same. Nothing's changed. So the way they've been able to maintain continuity, they deserve a round of applause on that alone. But the way they've raised the bar and up the ante in terms of the action set pieces, man oh man. Obviously, as you would expect, you know, when we get into that second hour and it all kicks off, you know, you've got Kenshin and his guys facing off against Onishi and his guys. It's ultimately going to come down to a one-on-one fight between Kenshin and Onishi. You'd hope it would. You know, the two brothers-in-law are going to resolve the differences at long last. Their fight at the end of the movie is phenomenal. It's because, of course, in Kenshin 3, we had that wonderful fight at the end when everyone just shows up to fight Shishio in that like 4-on-1 handicap match. That was great. But this, just one-on-one fight between Kenshin and Onishi, is fantastic. And one of the great things about this as well, because of course this final arc, this is the first time it's actually been adapted, really. It's obviously basically in its full form, I suppose you could say. It's only really existed in the manga, in the comics. There's an OVA called Rurouni Kenshin Reflection. They kind of incorporate elements of it in there, but not really. It's heavily abridged. So this is the first time we've actually get to see it play out in full form in an actual live, well, you know, in a medium other than on the page. And it's, you know, it's great. I mean, that character Onishi is obviously a really great character, and I think one of the things that makes this film stand out is it's the most personal of the Kenshin films that we've had, because there's that existing or pre-existing relationship there. You know, obviously the triangle, you've got obviously Kenshin and his wife Tomo, and then you've got Tomo's brother Onishi. You can understand, man, because obviously he was like 10-year-old when his sister was killed, and obviously he was there in the woods that day, and he saw it in front of his eyes. Obviously Kenshin is obviously ambushed, and he's fighting with the head of the leader of the ninja that had ambushed him, and they're going at it, and Tomo throws herself in the way to stop the other guy and save Kenshin, basically. But Kenshin's bringing the sword down, and he couldn't stop it. But the way it plays out from Anishi's point of view is like, yeah, he just cut my sister down, you know. So you can totally understand from Anishi's point of view. And also there's the whole thing as well, Tomo, the way she got involved in this whole thing, her fiance was a guard, or one of the bodyguards for one of the shogun lords, and he was basically killed by Kenshin in the street. So you've got the, it's kind of like the 1-2 punch. Like, you have the death of Tomo's fiance that obviously motivated Tomo to get involved. She wanted to find the man who... It's almost like a Spy Who Loved Me type thing. You know how you have Triple X, like, I'll find the man who killed my lover, and oh no, it's Bond. Oh, and then it's the same thing here. I want to find the man who killed my fiance. Okay, it's this guy they're calling Himura Batosai. Oh, right, okay, that's him. And oh no, I'm falling for him. It's the same thing. But when you look at it from Anishi's point of view, he's not going to appreciate, two people together in, an intimate setting for a long period of time. He's not going to appreciate, because he hasn't got that maturity, how emotions work. So the way he's saying it, that's the man who killed my sister's fiance. I mean, that's a direct line from the film. The man who took away my sister's happiness, and then he killed her. Taking the happiness away wasn't enough. Oh no, he has to go all the way and kill her. So you've got that 1-2 punch. So he ruined my sister's life, then he killed her, and also the man that my sister loved, he was a good man. So I'm not only am I getting, I suppose, in a way, from Anishi's perspective, not only am I getting revenge for my sister, I'm getting revenge for the man who would have been my brother-in-law, but then I got this guy instead. Who the hell is this? So yeah, you can totally understand Anishi's motivation. But they do a fantastic job of establishing very quickly that Anishi is very unbalanced. He's suffered, as you would understand might be the case, after his sister was killed and he saw it, he basically suffered a mental collapse. This guy's basically, he's on the ragged edge. He's very, very unstable, and you see that consistently throughout this film. He's totally unbalanced. And you have, again, he's a fantastic villain, but I think that's what makes him stand out, because in films 2 and 3 you had a fantastic villain, of course, in Shishio, and what Fujiwara Tatsuya did with it was great. You had this guy who was literally the dark version of Kenshin, whereas in this, obviously, you have this whole, it's much more personal dynamic, personal element, and the actor who plays Anishi, he does a fantastic job, again, in terms of the dramatic performance, and also in terms of I'll tell you what, you got to give credit where credit's due. In the fight scenes, he matches Takeru Sato step for step. He's phenomenal. Honestly, the villain in this really doesn't disappoint, and the way they wrap the whole thing up, you have a really you have a really great moment with him when they're concluding the film and wrapping everything up and resolving everything, where he ultimately is given his Kenshin beats him, as you would guess, and then he survives, and he's arrested. He's going to do serve his sentence, but he gets his sister's diary, because Misao gives it to Kaoru, and obviously Kaoru realizes, and basically she ends up sending the diary to Anishi, because Kaoru and Anishi have some really interesting scenes together. Basically, to hit Kenshin where it hurts, Anishi ends up kidnapping Kaoru and plans to murder her as a way of getting back at Kenshin, but he ultimately can't go through with it, so they're hinting at, look, this guy isn't gone completely off the deep end, there's still a semblance, there's still something there. But obviously Kaoru realises, this is a guy who's really been through a lot. So it's like, hopefully hopefully being able to read his sister's final words and understand her mindset, her feelings, that'll be able to give him the closure he needs. So that it's a really powerful scene. Anishi's last scene in this way is in the jail cell, and the diary arrives and he gets to read it and he breaks down. It's a tremendous acting moment as well. It's beautifully played. But yeah, I think they really delivered on that in terms of the whole villain dynamic and his motivations. I think, again, from a production standpoint, not everything's first class. Everything's beautifully done. The costumes as well, they've even upped the ante on the costumes. Everyone in this looks the best they've ever looked. So from that perspective, great. Obviously, action is absolutely first class. There's some fantastic surprises in there as well. People turning up who obviously it's no secret that Kamiki Ryunosuke comes back in this as Sojiro. The fight scene that he has in this, Jesus Christ, it's phenomenal. Also, you get Cho, the sword hunter, back in this as well, which is a real cool surprise. There's so much cool stuff in this. I think, if we were to be brutally honest though, one thing that lets this down, I think because there were certain things that it becomes very apparent that certain things have had to be, if not omitted, they've needed to be condensed. So you have certain things that maybe they don't elaborate upon or spend as much time on as they should. They kind of gloss over, because obviously 2 hours 20 minutes, they've got to pack a lot into it, and obviously there's a lot of characters in this. And a valid criticism, I think, of this is that as we get into the second half of the film, when we're wrapping things up and we're getting to the climax, there's a lot of characters that do get lost in the mix and basically forgotten about. And what was interesting, of course, films 2 and 3, they cover the whole Kyoto arc, the Kyoto Inferno arc with Shishio. So they had 2 films to play with, like a part 1 and a part 2. But even then, there was a lot they had to condense. Thing with this is, obviously, we got Kenshin the final and Kenshin the beginning. Obviously, this film is dealing with the final arc with Anishi, and then the beginning is going to, of course, deal with the trust and betrayal, remembrance or reminiscence arc, which will be set back in the the revolution, 1864, 1865, the 15 years earlier. So this film didn't have the same luxury in that sense that they had with the Kyoto arc, where we could have it spread across 2 films, and that's unfortunate. It is. So I think basically you kind of have to, you got to give them a bit of leeway. They did as much as they could in the amount of time that they had, basically, and they did the best they could. But it's fair to say that there are plot elements, characters that do get lost in the mix. I don't think it's unreasonable, therefore, to say that there are certain elements of the story, certain characters that don't get the wrap-up or the resolution that you might hope. Again, it's just to do with the fact that they had obviously this 2 hour 20 minute window to tell the story as best they could, and they had to work with what screen time they had. But of course, for my money, I was really happy with the way that they brought it all together, and you still do feel satisfied, and you still feel the emotional impact of the whole thing. So, and again, one of the things, it's been consistently the case throughout the original trilogy, and it's the same here, you really do feel the care and the passion and the attention to detail. It's so apparent, literally everyone from the original three films, same director, same creative team, same cast, stunt team, they're all back. So you have that, you really have that consistency there, So the people involved, they know what to do. They're so comfortable with these films, with these characters, with this setting, that they're able to just slip back into it as though they'd never been away. So that really adds to the whole thing. Of course, everyone in this is great. Obviously we mentioned Higuchi Yosuke, coolest cat in Japan next to Hiroyuki Sanada. He's great in this. Takeru Sato, he might well be immortal because he's just as fast now as he was when he did the first three films, and he hasn't aged at all. He's fantastic here. Of course, the actor who plays Enishi, Macaulay, he is great, fantastic villain. Of course, Emi Takai, so reliable as Kaoru. She's always great. And the stuff she has between her and Enishi in this, and the interesting, turmoil that she has. Obviously she's fallen in love with Kenshin. And then she finds out, oh, he had a wife. She plays it beautifully, and the way she interacts with Enishi when it comes face to face, it's great. And they have a really touching moment at the end where Kenshin and Kaoru visit Tomo's grave. It's reminiscent of the end of season 2 of the anime, the episode Kyoto the Engraved Memory. It's very reminiscent of the ending of that episode, so that was a cool touch. And of course, my man, Sanosuke Munetaka Aoki. You talk about a bundle of joy. During the promotion for all of these films, this guy's been just a constant ray of sunshine. He's got a fantastic sense of humour, and I'm sorry, he's great as Sanosuke. And he's the John McClane. He's the Indiana Jones of this. Like, if we've got the Dirty Harry in Hajime Saito, Sanosuke he's the John McClane, because this guy, you've got all these fantastic sword masters in this, and then you have Sanosuke, and Sanosuke, he's country strong and he's tough, not a refined fighter by any means. He's not a martial artist, but man, he will fight you. And I tell you what, some of the moments he has in this, in each of the movies he's always going to get some kind of one-on-one fight. And they don't disappoint here, but he takes a hell of a beat, man, but he comes back for more each and every time. And honestly, he's great. He's always great. And of course, getting this... Kamiki Ryanosuke, getting to see him back as Sojiro, that was so cool, man. It really was. And again, you talk about a really, really talented guy, be it, live action performances, and he's also a fantastic voice actor. Of course, voiced the lead character in Your Name, Kimi no Nawa. But it's so great because that was one of the things I'd hoped, because obviously clearly Sojiro survives in that third film, so you're always hoping, oh man, it would be great if they brought Sojiro back in some capacity. And the way they bring him back in this, it's cool, man. It's so cool. But yeah, that bringing this to a close then, man, I don't know. I mean, it's so good. There's always, for each of the films that have been made so far, there's been a consistent level of quality. They've been made with such care and such respect. This is one of the things I've talked about in conversation with friends. You always worry when an anime or an anime or a manga is going to be adapted into live action. You're like, I fear the worst. The great thing about the Kenshin's material, though, compared to a lot of other anime and manga, it's pretty grounded. So essentially, the process of adapting the material, it's essentially, you're making a samurai movie, basically. That's basically what it is. So it really does lend itself to adaptation very, very nicely. Okay, so that pretty much wraps this up. If you've seen Rurouni Kenshin the Final, please feel free to share your thoughts on it, if you enjoyed it, if you didn't. If you haven't seen this, if you haven't seen any of the Kenshin films, hopefully this might have sparked some interest. They're all on Netflix at the moment. As for this one in particular, this is a Netflix original technically, so this one's going to be there forever. And hey, you don't have to worry about paying any extra money, because they're already there. So, what have you got to lose? And I think there's an added bonus as well, all of them on Netflix at the moment. If you can't get away with subtitles, personally I prefer the subtitles with the original Japanese, but if you like an English dub, I think all 4 of them on Netflix have an English dub. So, what have you got to lose? But either way, hopefully you've enjoyed this. Hopefully you found it interesting, and again, please feel free to share your thoughts, and I wish you all the very best, guys. Thank you for listening to me ramble, and I will see you all next time. Thank you, everybody. Bye bye.